So first off, let's get some resin clay ready. Later on, we'll be adjusting the base color. We'll wrap up any excess clay with plastic wrap to prevent it from drying out, you know? Next up, let's get some coloring pigments ready. Since our resin clay is oil-based, we'll be using oil paints for adjusting the base color and adding color later on. Once we got the paints ready, we'll start color mixing. First up, we'll mix the colors for the stems. Just mix in Sunbird Sienna directly into the resin clay. Mix it all up real good. Got that nice and blended. Cause once the resin clay dries, it's gonna darken up a bit. Keep it on the lighter side for now, so don't go too dark with the color mixing. Moving on, let's get some white latex glue ready. White latex glue. It's the most used glue in the whole succulent making process. Then, let's start making the stems. First, get a piece of floral wire ready. Slather some white latex onto the wire. We got two ways to make the stem. One way is to shape our colored clay into a cylinder, then stick it onto the wire, or just wrap the resin clay directly onto it. Either way works. It's all good. Right now, I'm going with the first method, shaping the clay into a cylinder, then sticking it onto the wire. And then we'll grab a bent tip tweezer. Shape it a bit, you know? Make some bumps on this trunk here. These are marks left by fallen leaves. And at the bottom, press out some marks for growth, cause we're making an old stump. So it's gotta have some age to it. Some growth marks and all. Pressing out shapes at the bottom. That's the deal. Then, let's continue adding some spores on the stump. Cause, you know, stumps might sprout side buds. So, for realism, we'll add some side buds on there too, but not too many. Next up, we can make some small holes in our stems. Cause, you know, during its growth, it might get a little nicked up. Might get some holes in the stem, you know? After that, let's grab our tweezers again and make some grooves on the stems. Cause stems usually have some grooves and all. We'll just make some more grooves for realism, just to make it look more natural, you know? Make it look real. So, next up, let's make another stem using the second method. This time, we're wrapping the colored clay directly onto the stem. The method's still the same, though. First, we gotta slather some white latex onto the wire. Then, wrap our colored clay onto the stem. Same deal. Now, the stems we've made, we gotta let them sit for 3 to 4 hours before using them. Dry out a bit. Makes it easier to add the leaves later on. For real. Next, let's make the base for our leaves. The color we're using for the leaves is cinnabar green, but if you don't have that, you can use a permanent green light, sap green, and orange to mix. More of the permanent green light, less of the orange and sap green. That should get you close to the colors we're using in the video. Mix it up right, and you're good to go. Once we've got our colors sorted, let's move on to making the base. Now that we've got our colors down, we can start making the base for our leaves. For this, we'll need 2 shades of the same color, both in the green family. One a bit darker than the other. 2 shades of green. You got it? Both in the same color family. This way, our succulent will have a nice gradient effect to it. It will appear much more authentic. To adjust the color of our stems, we simply apply the colors directly onto the clay. Then we mix them evenly. The more pigments we add, the deeper the color becomes. Afterwards, we have two pieces of clay, one darker and one lighter. Next, we began crafting our leaf portions. We started making our leaf by first cutting a small piece of wire. Then, we take the slightly dried stems we prepared earlier and dip the tip of the wire in some white glue. After that, we insert it into the top end of the stem for stability. Once the wire at the top is secured, we take half of the colored clay, and while weaving, we can either place the lighter color inside or the darker ones inside. For the succulent we're currently making, we placing the lighter color inside. We roughly shape it into a 3mm sphere. Then, we apply white latex glue to the tip of the wire. And proceed to attach the 3mm sphere to the top of our wire. We fixed it at the top of our wires. When fixing it, we need to adjust its shape slightly, making it resemble a cone, because this is the core we'll be inserting right in the middle. Next is the leaf making demonstration. First, we shape the colored clay into a sphere, then into a cone. At the rounded tip, we create a small pointed corner. Then, we flatten it in the palm of our hand with a round stick, creating a leaf with a thicker top and a thinner bottom. We then thin out the edges with our fingers. This completes the leaf, giving it a certain thickness. For any rough spots, we can smooth them out by rubbing them with our fingers. So what's next? We're going to start making our first layer of leaves. So for the first layer of leaves, the dimensions we're using are roughly 4mm and 5mm. So we can choose to make one about 4mm, one about 5mm, and another one about 4.5mm. And there you go, a leaf is quickly made. Then, let's move on to making the second one. Each leaf is thicker at the top and thinner at the bottom, with a certain thickness. Now, onto the third leaf. If we don't have this roller, we can also use any cylindrical object for substitution. Next, we start sticking our leaves onto the rod we've made. First, we apply some white latex on the spores we made earlier, then on the end of our leaf, which is the thinner end. We also apply white glue on the inside, then we just stick it on. If it doesn't feel secure, we can also add a tiny amount of super glue to the end of the leaf to secure it. And there you go! Our leaves are evenly distributed and stuck on the spores. That's it! And that's how we make the first layer of leaves. Now, let's move on to making our second layer of leaves. Now, when making the second layer of leaves, the dimensions are roughly between 6 millimeters and 7 millimeters. Each layer of leaves should be slightly larger than the previous one. When pinching the leaves, they should also be slightly longer. We can also make comparisons as we go along. If the leaves seem too short, you can pinch another one. Similarly, the second layer also has 3 leaves. We can choose to make 1 6 millimeters and to 7 millimeters leaves, or 1 6 millimeters and to 6.5 millimeters leaves. Just like the first layer, we fix the leaves with white latex glue. Our leaves are first coated with white latex glue on the front of the first layer we made earlier. Then apply some more glue to the bottom of our new second layer leaves. Then just paste them on. Similarly, if you feel it's not secure enough, you can add a small amount of super glue at the end. Make sure it's a very small amount, not too much. When pasting the leaves, we always paste them alternately, always in between 2 leaves, and then wrap another leaf around them. Our second layer of leaves is now assembled. Next, we can start preparing the third layer of leaves. So when we started making the third layer, we need to pay attention. We need a new color of clay for this. We mix light and dark clay in a 1:1 ratio. This color will be used for making the third and fourth layers. The size is about 8 millimeters for the third layer. Then the same method. Fix the leaves. Paste with white latex glue. Then it's the fourth layer. The fourth layer is about 10 millimeters in size, also with mixed colors. The same method. First mold the leaves into a ball, then mold it into a cone. Then on top of it, pinch a little point at the top of the circle. Then slightly flattened, our leaves can be made more pointed like in the video, or can be made flattering. Those made in the video are more pointed. We can also make wider leaves. The method of making is the same. Then we still use the same method to install the leaves. Near the stem. At this time, the leaves are larger, so near the stem. You can dip a small amount of super glue for fixing. Then we start making our 5th layer. Still 3 leaves, about 11 millimeters in size. At this time, the gaps between the leaves gradually widen. So our 6th layer is the same size as the 5th layer. When the 6th layer is installed, from the 7th layer onwards, we need to start adding more leaves. Now we are making the 6th layer. First, mold our leaves, similar to the 5th layer. Then we started making our 7th layer. When making the 7th layer, we need to make 6 leaves of the same size. The size is about 12 millimeters. Install our leaves in the same way. Between every 2 leaves, install our new leaves. After that, I made another succulent. The leaves are wider. And put the light color on the outside, dark colors on the inside. Then we come to color our succulent. When coloring, we must pay attention to less amount and more times. The colors we use is still the color we adjusted before. Cinnabar green. So first, we're gonna apply the colors inside the leaves. Let it create a gradient effect. Then we'll dip a bit of orange. Again, following the less is more rule, brush it onto the tips of the leaves. When we're brushing, we want to create a gradient effect too, going from dark at the tips to light inside. The color mainly stays at the tips. Lastly, we'll dip into a bit of crimson, coloring the tips of the leaves once again. Same technique. We're gonna blend it. The color should only be at the tips, gradually fading downwards. And that's it for coloring our succulent. This is how our leaf looks after coloring. Now, We're gonna color the stems next. For the stem, we ray using burnt sienna. We'll directly apply burnt sienna onto the stem, like on the spores we made earlier, and any damaged parts, to give them a deeper color in other areas. We don't want it to dark, then we'll apply ochre on top. Basically, let yellow ochre and burnt sienna blend evenly, without any clear boundaries, no obvious colored edges. That's how we color our succulent. Here's the final result. Our finished product. This is the final effect for our stems. It'll take about 3 to 4 days to completely dry. Now, let's color another succulent. Same process for the stem, same coloring method as before, and the same technique for the leaf coloration.